Joined now by Dr. Adeoye Akinola, who is a head of research and teaching at the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg. Doctor, good afternoon to you. I really do appreciate the time this afternoon. It's interesting, you would think that as the two biggest economies on our continent, South Africa and Nigeria, would find many areas to work together, and obviously we do. We do still find some areas where there's a little bit of contestation. Why don't we get on as well as we should?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on the program. As you have mentioned, and as the two honorable ministers also reflected just shortly, there are great potentials between South Africa and Nigeria when they cooperate. And as you have also noted, of course, there are relatively an area of frictions between the two countries, particularly on migration. But I also strongly believe that what they stand to benefit when they work together diplomatically is greater than whatever challenges that could be confronting the two countries, particularly people-to-people relationship on the ground. Of course, that is not as if that is not significant, but I also believe that that should be relegated to the background because of the greater picture. There are many issues confronting Africa, and you know as well as I do that when South Africa and Nigeria cooperate and they move, Africa will move. That is how I can just respond in a very short few sentences.
Is the biggest problem really the, let me choose my words carefully, the feeling by Nigerians that South Africans are xenophobic towards them in South Africa? Is that really the problem?
Well, that's one of the big issues, as we have seen over the years, where we have seen complaints by many Nigerians living in South Africa of discriminations across board, not only on the street, but we also have institutional discrimination as they have complained. But as I have noted, the issues of migration is across the globe, from the United States even to Europe, where we have securitization of migration, even across many African countries, not only in South Africa. We have many African countries that migrants community have also accused their governments of discrimination and anti-migration policy. So for me, of course, it is decisive to resolve that, and I hope that because the minister spoke about people-to-people relations, I hope they will dwell on that. But there are also bigger pictures, and I believe they are talking about trade. This is a very decisive moment in the history of the world where the voices of Africa have been taken seriously at the international stage. So I believe cooperation between Nigeria and South Africa in terms of responding to those global challenges that affect Africa, issues of climate change, of poverty, underdevelopment, debt issue, should be more paramount on their table, even as they meet for today.
So President Cyril Ramaphosa is in his second term as president. There is a relatively new president in Nigeria, Dr. Bola Tinubu. Our president's also leading, I mean, it's an ANC government, but it's a different government because it's a coalition. Is this maybe a moment for two democratically elected leaders to try and find more ways to work together and reduce tensions a little bit? Sometimes when you have a little bit of a political change, it's much easier for people to now work together again.
This is a unique opportunity, as you have just mentioned, because, of course, South Africa has been under the ANC for almost 29 years, well, almost 30 years. But now we have a government of national unity. And even in Nigeria, despite the fact that Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been on the corridors of government for years, is someone that I know that he has a fresh mind towards issues of continental and regional significance. So I believe that the two countries and their diplomatic team should be able to possibly resolve the differences, put them aside, and work towards the emancipation of the African child, not just in the continent and even outside of the continent. We are talking about two powerful countries on the continent. I know the GDP of the two countries put together is more than $700 billion US, compared to the the relatively average GDP of Africa, that is about 3.1 trillion. That's significant. So if these two countries can combine their resources together, work towards ameliorating whatever conflict, whatever tension that could be existing between them, Africa stands a better chance in terms of development, peace, and security. And like I hinted initially, this is the time for the two countries to act collectively.
So what would be the main areas they would do that? I mean, obviously, South Africa has deep capital markets. We have money to invest. We have certain technologies. We're quite good at mining. I think you know that, Dr. Akinola. Nigeria's economy has been growing quite strongly from time to time. There are lots of opportunities for both countries here. Where would we prioritize? And I presume development would be one of them.
Yes, I think development is one of them, but the question is, what kinds of development are we talking about? How do we develop human capacity within the space if the two countries were to even actually cooperate? I love the minister's statement, which also reflected on trade. I also listened to the ambassador from Nigeria, the minister, also speaking about manufacturing, mining, and even energy. Both countries, of course, South Africa is better in terms of access to electricity, for instance, but Nigeria has suffered years of electrical outage, which is becoming the norm in the country. And we are also talking about a Nigerian that is highly resourceful in terms of crude oil resources. And I know one of the biggest businessmen in Nigeria just constructed a refinery in Nigeria, and I think they can work together along those lines. I also know that South Africa are also very strong in terms of having companies in not just the upstream sector of the oil company, but also in the downstream oil sector. So I also think they can collaborate. Then in terms of educational exchange and even tourism, hardly do you see Nigeria saying, I'm coming to South Africa for tourism. And hardly do you see South Africa traveling to Nigeria for tourism. And I believe the two of them can also expand the people-to-people exchange, even in that aspect. And we're also talking about banking. I know South African banks is very strong. I've seen them across many African countries. So why not make strengthen their presence in Nigeria? And Nigeria can also do the same. And we have a businessman in Nigeria, Dangote by name, who is exceedingly interested in also investing outside of Nigeria. So why can't South Africa open economic space for such people to invest? And when you talk about issues of governance, democratization, South Africa has actually fared better in terms of democratization. So they have many lessons to share with Nigeria, and Nigeria will also tell you that they have also become stable since 1999. So there are notes to compare, and I hope they will do that during this meeting.
Dr. Adeoye Akinola, thank you. Head of Research and Teaching at the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg. Our coverage, of course, of this Bi-National Commission will continue.